Jinnah of Pakistan by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 13, Lahore to Delhi, 1940 to 1942. Seeking purer air at higher altitudes for his tubercular lungs, Jinnah went up to the Nandni Hills in Mysore state and Ottakamund to try to recover strength after Madras. What respite he found would only be temporary, for the insidious illness that drained his energy was by now irreversible. Nor could he stop smoking. Jinnah's health remained precarious all that summer, and indeed by July he was still too weak to accept a telephoned invitation from Bombay's governor, Sir Roger Lumley, to come visit him in Puna's Ganesh Khind, the governor's summer house, about 90 miles from Bombay, to learn of Linlithgow's plan for constitutional change. Sir Roger wrote confidentially to Jinnah on July 20th. He is establishing, with the approval of His Majesty's government, a National Defence Council. This council will consist of some 30 members, 9 of whom will be drawn from Indian states. The Viceroy regards it as essential that the great Muslim community should be represented on that council by persons of the highest prominence and capacity. He has accordingly invited the Premier of Assam, Bengal, the Punjab, and Sindh to serve as members of it. He has considered whether he should invite you to let him have any suggestions as to possible personnel for this council. But being aware, as he is, of your general attitude, he has concluded that it would be preferable not to embarrass you by inviting you to make suggestions. Jinnah was not embarrassed. He was infuriated. He read the Viceroy's invitations to Sir Sikandar Fazlul Haq and the League Premier of Assam, Sir Muhammad Sadullah, as a direct challenge to his authority and power over each of them as President of the Muslim League. Sikandar, in fact, had appealed personally to Viceroy for Punjabi representation on the expanded Executive Council, and Linlithgow had long found him much easier to deal with than Jinnah. That August, Jinnah called his working committee to Bombay to deal with this challenge from Simla. Sir Sikandar, Fazlul Haq and Sadullah tried in vain to argue that they had joined the Viceroy's Defence Council as provincial premiers rather than as representatives of Muslim opinion. Jinnah gave them no option but to quit the council or leave the league. Sikandar, after a long private talk with Jinnah, agreed to abide by the decision of the committee. Sikandar's capitulation was followed immediately by his resignation and that of Sir Sadullah from the Viceroy's Defence Council. Fazlul Haq, however, proved less pliable, and though he promised to resign from the Viceroy's Council, he was most dilatory about doing it. But he did resign from both the National Defence Council and the Working Committee of the League, as a mark of protest against the arbitrary use of powers vested in its president, voicing the strongest opposition to Jinnah's leadership and articulating what may in retrospect be viewed as a nascent Bangladeshi position against West Pakistani dominance. The Muslim Premier of Bengal argued that recent events have forcibly brought home to me that the principles of democracy and autonomy in the All India Muslim League are being subordinated to the arbitrary wishes of a single individual who seeks to rule as an omnipotent authority even over the destiny of 33 millions of Muslims in the province of Bengal who occupy the key position in Indian Muslim politics. Begum Shah Nawaz and Sir Sultan Ahmad, unlike Sir Sikandar Fazlul Haq and Assam's Sadullah, refused to resign from the Viceroy's Council and were therefore expelled from the Muslim League for 5 years. For the Begum, it was a particularly bitter pill to swallow since she had been so close to Jinnah during the round table conferences in London. She was later to relent and would return to League's fold, but only after her half-decade of ostracism. The government, in the teeth of our opposition, tried to maneuver and wean some of our members by associating them with this scheme, Jinnah remarked during his Eid Day message that October. 3 of them were provincial premiers, of whom 2 were members of the working committee. Well, you know what happened. I am glad and we have reason to be proud that the British government have been taught a lesson. Out of evil cometh good. Muslim India, from one end to another, demonstrated that it was solidly behind the Muslim League. I hope in future our opponents will learn that it is futile to attempt to create disruptions in our ranks. That chapter is now closed. Jinnah withdrew the League's elected members from the central legislature at this time more forcibly to impress upon the Viceroy his dissatisfaction with the government's behavior, and he called for a clear declaration of British policy towards all Muslim countries, demanding that Great Britain affirm its non-intervention policy with regard to universal Muslim sovereignty and independence. He appointed Isfahani to Fazlul Huq's seat on the working committee. Japan's startling victories in the wake of Pearl Harbor now raised the specter of an Axis invasion of India from the east. Since expanding his executive council, Linlithgow had been pressing Churchill's cabinet for permission to release Nehru as well as other key Congress leaders from jail in response to demands from his non-official advisers. The Viceroy was eager to show his new members that they could, in fact, get things done, but Churchill was reluctant, arguing that undoubtedly the release of these prisoners as an act of clemency will be proclaimed as a victory for Gandhi's party. Nehru and others will commit fresh offences requiring whole process of trial and conviction to be gone through again. You will get no thanks from any quarter. Still, Linlithgow insisted. Emery agreed. Most of the cabinet closed ranks behind them, so that early in December, when Churchill convened his war cabinet to debate the issue, he sensed their mood immediately upon looking around the room and said somewhat sorrowfully, "I give in," adding, "Sotto voce, when you lose India, don't blame me." Jinnah journeyed to Nagpur on his birthday to address the All India Muslim Students Federation on December 26, 1941. My young friends, today you compare yourselves with what was the position of the Muslims even 3 years ago, Jinnah told them. 5 years ago, it was wretched. 10 years ago, you were dead. The Muslim League has given you a goal which, in my judgment, is going to lead you to the promised land where we shall establish our Pakistan. People may say what they like and talk as they like. Of course, he who laughs last laughs best. Fazlul Huq resigned his League ministry in Calcutta, opting to head a new coalition of his Proja party members and Hindu Mahasabhites led by their national vice president, Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. He persuaded the Nawab of Dhaka to join his new cabinet, which Isfahani called going over to the enemy. By that unexpected coup, he proved again his political dexterity and durability. The old fox who is now called the black sheep of Barisal, Huq's hometown, is playing at one game only, and that is to gain time, bemoaned Isfahani, and Jinnah asked at Nagpur. And in Bengal, what is the Congress party doing? The Congress party has supported this new coalition ministry formed by Mr. Huq, and by virtue of it, he was able to form a government and continued to be the premier. Now, I make a Christmas gift of Mr. Huck to Lord Linlithgow. I make another New Year's gift of the Nawab of Dhaka to the Governor of Bengal. I am very glad and I am very happy that Muslim India is rid of these men who are guilty of the grossest treachery and betrayal of the Muslims. Both Bengali leaders were expelled from the League, weeded out, as Jinnah put it. Linlithgow urged Sir Roger Lumley, the governor of Bombay, to invite Jinnah to a meal, and he did so in mid-January 1942, when Oxford professor Reginald Copeland arrived on his unofficial tour in search of a creative constitutional settlement. I asked Jinnah to lunch and he came today, Lumley reported, and Jinnah was most friendly throughout, and if there is any effect from this social contact with him, I think it would be favorable after lunch. I had a talk with him, which I had intended would be a short one, so that he could then tackle Copeland. But at the first opening, he proceeded to give me an exposition of the Muslim League position, which lasted for 3/4 of an hour. It was all most friendly, very logical, and well argued from the Muslim League point of view. But there seemed to me to be no indication at all of any change in his position. He appeared quite satisfied with our attitude, although he expressed some fears that the British press and public opinion would be taken in by Congress and other Hindu propaganda. Lumley was considerably impressed by the logic of Jinnah's argument, but in the aftermath of their talk saw no prospect for any solution to the constitutional deadlock. India is hopelessly and, I suspect, irremediably split by racial and religious divisions which we cannot bridge and which become more acute as any real transfer of power by us draws nearer, Linlithgow reported to Emery before the end of January of 1942. Attlee was distinctly disturbed by Linlithgow's defeatist position. He informed Emery after reading it that he had lost considerable confidence in the Viceroy's judgment, suggesting that perhaps someone from home should now be sent to India charged with a mission to try to bring the political faders together. Labour's candidate for that job was Sir Stafford Cripps, who just returned from Moscow, where he had served as the British ambassador. Jinnah left Bombay on February 10th, taking an all-day and overnight train to Calcutta. A jubilant crowd awaited him at Howrah station and escorted him in gala procession to Muhammad Ali Park, over which he twisted the Muslim League flag on February 13th, 1942. Up to the present moment, Muslims were absolutely demoralized, said the Quaid-e-Azam, whose personal preoccupation with death and dying had by now infected most of his political pronouncements. Our blood had become cold, our flesh was not capable of working, and the Muslim nation was, for all practical purposes, dead. Today, we find that our blood circulation is improving, our flesh is getting stronger, and above all, our mind is getting more clarified. From Calcutta, he was driven to Sirajganj in East Bengal to preside over the Bengal Provincial Muslim League Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, the Muslim League has many opponents. We are going through a life and death struggle. We must stand on our own two legs and rely on our own strength if we are to achieve anything in this world. The unexpected fall of Singapore on 15th February 1942, where a British Indian garrison of some 60,000 troops surrendered to Japan with hardly a shot being fired, sent fresh chills of anxiety through New Delhi and Simla, as well as through Whitehall. The really difficult point is how to reconcile our pledge about agreement with the criticism that we are deliberately holding up all progress by giving a blackmailing veto to the minorities. Emery wrote to Linlithgow in late February, briefing setting out what would essentially be Cripp's proposals. If there are sufficient provinces who want to get together and form a dominion, the dissident provinces should be free to stand out and either come in after a period of option or be set up at the end of it as dominions of their own. Jinnah could not quarrel with that, nor, on the other hand, could Congress feel that it is denied the opportunity of complete independence for that part of India which it controls. The India Office prepared a note for Britain's War Cabinet on the possible impact of constitutional changes in India or her army, which had more than doubled in size since the war's start to over 1 million. In the pre-war Indian army, soldiers had expressed anxieties about their own future if the British Raj surrendered to Congress demands. There was still a strong feeling that the British officer is the surest guardian of the soldiers' interest, Whitehall reported. It is difficult to say how any concession to Congress would assist the war effort in respect to the military personnel of the army. On the other hand, it might result in the ruin of the Indian army as at present constituted. Armed with so formidable a note, Emery advised the Prime Minister that any declaration of Indian policy for the future must make it clear unequivocally that we stand by our pledge of 1940 to the Muslims and the princes, that they are not to be coerced into any system of Indian government of which they disapprove. This is in any case vital at present in view of possible effects upon the Muslim claimant in the Indian army. Sir Stafford Cripps was brought into Britain's War Cabinet that February as Lord Privy Seal and made Leader of the House of Commons. He was appointed to serve on Deputy Prime Minister Attlee's India Committee of the War Cabinet and helped draft what that committee considered an appropriate declaration by the month's end, promising to lay down in precise and clear terms the steps by which His Majesty's government planned to create a new Indian Union to become a free and equal dominion within the British Commonwealth of Nations. Before agreement could be reached on the proposed declaration, however, Rangoon fell to the Japanese Blitz across Southeast Asia. Jinnah wired Churchill to warn against the plausible, subtle and consequently more treacherous proposals of Tapru and his colleagues, petrol agents for the Congress. If the British government is stampeded into the trap laid for them, Muslim India would be sacrificed with most disastrous consequences, especially in regard to the war effort, cautioned the Quaid-e-Azam. On February 22nd, at a Delhi meeting of the League's Working Committee, Jinnah stated that direct revolt would follow any British acceptance of Sapru's proposed unitary constitutional scheme of reforms. Churchill therefore decided that a declaration spelling out the constitutional process for transforming British India into a dominion was too dangerous, opting instead to send Cripps out to India to sound out the parties on the spot as to their feelings about a proposal the cabinet approved. The document on which we have agreed represents our united policy, Churchill informed Linlithgow in early March. If that is rejected by the Indian parties for whose benefit it has been devised, our sincerity will be proved to the world and we shall stand together and fight on it here, should that ever be necessary. Prime Minister Churchill rose in the House of Commons at noon on Wednesday, March 11, 1942, to proclaim in his uniquely inspiring baritone that the crisis in the affairs of India arising out of the advance of Japan has made us wish to rally all the forces of Indian life to shield their land from the menace of the invader. He then announced the decision to send two less distinguished a member of the War Cabinet to India. Then the Lord Privy Seal, who carries with him the full confidence of His Majesty's government, and will strive in their name to procure the necessary measure of assent not only from the Hindu majority but also from the great minorities, amongst which the Muslims are the most important. Cripps was thus launched on the most frustrating mission of his life. Cripps flew to Karachi on March 22nd, was quarantined in isolation overnight, and touched down at New Delhi's airport the following day. Pakistan Day, the second anniversary of the Lahore Resolution that was celebrated in Delhi by a mile-long procession and a mass public meeting addressed by Jinnah. I can say without fear of contradiction that the Muslim League stands more firmly for the freedom and independence of this country than any other party. Quaid-e-Azam told a crowd of 50,000 Muslims in Urdu Park. We are asking for justice and fair play. We have no designs upon our sister communities. We want to live in this land as a free and independent nation. We are not a minority but a nation. Referring to Cripps' mission, Jinnah said, "There is a fear that he is a friend of the Congress. He has enjoyed the hospitality of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. That is all true, but we should not be afraid on that score. Don't get cold feet. We are prepared to face all the consequences if any scheme or solution which is detrimental to the interests of the Muslims is forced upon us. We shall not only not accept it, but resist it to the utmost of our capacity. If we have to die in the attempt, we shall die fighting." Cripps met with Maulana Azad, then out of jail, on March 25th. The Congress president's English, he learned, was not as good as his Persian or Arabic. Azad insisted that to mobilize Indians effectively, it was necessary to give them control of the defense of their country. Cripps pointed out that strategically, India had to be regarded as part of a much greater theatre of war. Azad reiterated his point, however, and Cripps decided that what Congress really wanted was the appearance and name of an Indian defense minister, not actual control over the movement of the troops or other military arrangements. Jinnah arrived at the Viceroy's palace just as Azad was leaving. Cripps explained that he had not taken the Muslim League or Pakistan propaganda very seriously during his last visit 2.5 years ago, but assured Jinnah that he had changed his view because of the change in the communal feeling in India and the growth of Pakistan movement. Cripps then handed Jinnah the document he had brought from London, which I think rather surprised him in the distance it went to meet the Pakistan case. He stated, of course, that he was not prepared to give any views on it, but we had a long discussion as to its effect, especially upon Bengal and the Punjab. And the main thing with which he was concerned was whether they would have the effective right to opt out of the constitution in the event of their so desiring. Jinnah then promised to lay the matter before his working committee in Delhi and to come back and see me immediately afterwards. He was extremely cordial, and when we parted expressed the view to me that the one thing that mattered was to be able to mobilize the whole of India behind her own defense, and that he was personally most anxious to achieve this. Expert negotiator that he was, Jinnah wisely refrained in his opening meeting with Cripps from any pernickety criticism. Cripps' meeting with Gandhi on March 27th did not begin on a happy note. Gandhi considered it extremely inadvisable to publish the document and urged Cripps to refrain from doing so, asking what Jinnah thought. I told him that he had suggested that, in view of the danger of leakage, it would be wise to publish it before too long, and he interpreted this as being an indication that Jinnah would accept the scheme. I then asked him how, supposing Jinnah were to accept the scheme and Congress were to not to, he would himself advise me to proceed. He said that in these circumstances, the proper course would be for me to throw the responsibility upon Jinnah and tell him that he must now try to get Congress in either by negotiating direct with them or by meeting them in association with myself. He thought that if it was pointed out to Jinnah what a very great position this would give him in India if he succeeded, that he might take on the job and that he might succeed. It was one of Gandhi's most brilliant ideas, turning over premier power and responsibility to Jinnah, but no British viceroy or cabinet leader had the courage or wisdom to try the idea. On March 29th, Nehru came to breakfast with Cripps, and then both of them went to Birla House to see Gandhi, Azad, and others of the working committee of the Congress. Cripps listened and argued for hours. The general attitude of Nehru, who was tired and not well, was mild and conciliatory, and he left me in complete doubt as to whether Congress was more or less decided not to accept it and that it was not worth arguing or pressing for any alteration, or whether he was not inclined to press his particular objections in view of the general character of the scheme and its grant of free self-government in India. Less than a week gone by, and crisp British confidence was fast dissolving in the miasma of Indian complexity, ambiguity, and transcendental doubt. Cripps had been counting on his close friendship with Nehru and Krishna Menon as the key to resolving the communal puzzle that had baffled Morley, shattered Montague, eluded Ramsay MacDonald, flabbergasted Irwin, destroyed Motilal Nehru, and had all but driven Jinnah into permanent exile in Hampstead. He truly believed, or at least desperately hoped, he might achieve in a fortnight what the best brains of England and India had failed to accomplish over the past quarter century of concentrated effort and countless futile hours of intense negotiations. Perhaps it was just that, with stakes so high, he could not resist a roll at that fatal game, suspecting, as one of his confidants put it, that if he brought this settlement off, Cripps would certainly replace Winston. His fatal flaw was, however, that he believed himself omnipotent, forgetting what Kipling had written of his well-intentioned forebearers. He hoped to hustle the East. At this juncture, President Franklin D. Roosevelt sent his former Assistant Secretary of War, Colonel Louis Johnson, out to India as his personal representative, introducing Johnson to Linlithgow as a man of broad experience with problems relating to military supply, who was selected for this important mission because of his outstanding ability and high character. Churchill, Emery, and Linlithgow were all anxious about the possible political implications of a secret agenda for Colonel Johnson's mission. Linlithgow's representative in Washington wrote that Roosevelt seemed to think that the plan concerning immediate federation did not go far enough, and he felt that complete autonomy, including power to raise armies, should be given to provinces. As soon as Linlithgow, Emery, and Churchill learned that Johnson and Roosevelt would do nothing to twist their political arms by the way of conceding more to a non-cooperating Congress, the Cripps game was over. Only Cripps refused to believe he was finished. He kept meeting with Indian leaders, holding press conferences, sending longer and longer secret telegrams home, and doggedly flogging the horse that had died under him. The once bright and rising star of his political career went into eclipse under India's blinding sun. On April 2nd, Azad and Nehru handed Cripps the Congress Working Committee's resolution rejecting his offer. Instead of thanking them and flying home, Cripps wired the text of that resolution to Churchill and set up a meeting with Azad, Nehru, and Field Marshal Sir Archibald Wavell, 1883 to 1950. The tight-lipped commander-in-chief, who replaced Linlithgow as viceroy the following year, was then fighting a losing battle in Malaya and Burma, desperately hoping he would keep the Japanese from smashing through India's eastern wall of rugged mountainous forest. He had no time and less talent for political gamesmanship. With one glass eye and little to smile about, Wavell was hardly a personality to appeal to Nehru, Azad, or Cripps, nor was he ready voluntarily to release any of the military strings he controlled. Still, Cripps was determined to try to bring Nehru and Wavell into harness. Jinnah left Delhi on Thursday, April 2nd, taking the night train to Allahabad, where the annual session of the Muslim League started that Friday. A cheering crowd greeted him with shouts of Quaid-e-Azam Zindabad at Allahabad's Central Railway Station, then escorted him through more than 100 green tinsel-decorated arches of triumph that led to the packed pandal in Mahmoodabad's garden. Jinnah presented his brief of Cripps' proposals in a clear, succinct manner, saying, now that the scheme was really dead, how deeply disappointed all Muslims were to find that the entity and integrity of the Muslim nation has not been expressly recognized. Any attempt to solve the problem of India by the process of evading the real issues and by overemphasizing the territorial entity of the provinces, which are mere accidents of British policy and administrative division, is fundamentally wrong. Muslim India will not be satisfied until the right of national self-determination is unequivocally recognized. On Easter Sunday of that year, Colonel Johnson met with Cripps for the first time at the Viceroy's house over lunch, and each recognized a potential ally in the other, for both were liberal legal minds who felt as far removed intellectually from the Viceroy and his commander-in-chief as they were culturally from Nehru and Azad. Both enjoyed more confidence in high places in London and Washington, moreover, than either did in New Delhi or Simla, and each in his own way had fallen under the spell of Nehru's cosmopolitan charm. So, in the spirit of Easter Sunday, they joined forces hoping to resurrect the mission that had truly expired on Good Friday. They moved with great energy, resourcefulness, and top secrecy, meeting Nehru, Azad, and other leaders of Congress at all hours of day and night, convincing themselves that there was indeed light at the end of India's constitutional tunnel. They came to believe that all Congress really wanted was control over the Ministry of Defense. So they worked out an elaborate, ingenious formula whereby that ministry could nominally be put under an Indian, while all of its real martial responsibilities would remain under the commander-in-chief, who would instead be called Minister of War. And they actually thought that would suffice to solve India's problem. Cripps had even drawn up a list of Indian cabinet ministers for the new national government he was going to install, and Congress President Azad was his choice. For Home Minister in charge of police, Azad, whom Jinnah would not speak to and referred to as a showboy Muslim. Johnson thought he had convinced Nehru of the wisdom of cooperating and of the surety that he could carry Congress, just as he thought Cripps could swing Churchill into line. It was an illusion spun out of India's torrid heat. Many cables were exchanged between London and India in the next few days, including one from Churchill informing Cripps that Johnson was not Roosevelt's representative in any matter outside the specific mission dealing with Indian munitions and kindred topics on which he was sent. All cables were unnecessary. Congress turned down the proposal despite its revised form. On April 10, 1942, just as Gandhi had predicted, they would be the first time he had met Cripps. Explaining his party's rejection of the offer, Congress President Azad wrote Cripps, We are yet prepared to assume responsibility, provided a truly national government is formed. But in the present, the national government must be a cabinet government with full power and must not merely be a continuation of Viceroy's Executive Council. We would point out to you that the suggestions we have put forward are not ours only, but may be considered to be the unanimous demand of the Indian people. On these matters, there is no difference of opinion amongst the various groups and parties. There is no foundation for that assertion, Jinnah told the press as soon as he read Azad's final assertion several days later. Muslim India has repudiated that claim. We maintain that the Congress does not represent not only the Muslims of India but even a large body of Hindus, the depressed classes, the non-Brahmins and other minorities. He also repudiated all negotiations that Congress had carried on with Cripps over the head of all other parties, reiterating what had been his basic position for over 2 years. If all parties agree to the Muslim demand for Pakistan or partition and Muslim right of self-determination, details to be settled after the war, then we are prepared to come to any reasonable adjustment with regard to the present. On April 12, 1942, Cripps wired Churchill, "There is clearly no hope of agreement and I shall start home on Sunday." To Azad he wrote, "You suggest a truly national government be formed which must be cabinet government with full power. Without constitutional changes of a most complicated character and on a very large scale, this would not be possible as you realize." The proposals of His Majesty's government went as far as possible. Roosevelt urged Churchill to postpone Cripps' departure, reporting that in the United States, the feeling is almost universally held that the deadlock has been caused by the unwillingness of the British government to concede to the Indians the right of self-government, notwithstanding the willingness of the Indians to entrust technical, military and naval defense control to the competent British authorities. American public opinion cannot understand why, if the British government is willing to permit the component parts of India to secede from the British Empire after the war, it is not willing to permit them to enjoy what is tantamount to self-government during the war. Churchill chose to pocket that cable rather than show it to his cabinet or use it to wire Cripps back to New Delhi from Karachi, where he just landed. Churchill had not, after all, become the Prime Minister to preside over the dissolution of His Majesty's empire. The Working Committee of the Muslim League issued its resolution on the Cripps offer shortly after Congress resolved upon rejection. The committee, while expressing their gratification that the possibility of Pakistan is recognized by implication by providing for the establishment of 2 or more independent unions in India, regret that no alternative proposals are invited. In view of the rigidity of the attitude of His Majesty's government with regard to the fundamentals not being open to any modification, the committee has no alternative but to say that the proposals in the present form are unacceptable. The Muslims cannot be satisfied by such a declaration on a vital question affecting their future destiny and demand a clear and precise pronouncement on the subject. Any attempt to solve the future problem of India by the process of evading the real issue is to quote disaster. Once again, Jinnah had raised the minimal terms for negotiating any settlement to the most persistent political problem of recent Indian history. Pakistan was hardly a pernickety demand.